Good morning.
Good morning.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious God, you see your children growing up in an unsteady world. Help us to teach them that your ways are the ways that give life. And help us as parents, as teachers, as churches and institutions to mirror the love and compassion and the truth that ultimately character is destiny. And may we open our minds to having an increased imagination for not only what we can teach our kids about our society, but what our society can become through their present and future leadership. This we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
About 25 years ago, Robert Coles, a professor of psychiatry at Harvard, wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review called The Inner Life of Executive Kids, in which he talked about both the benefits and the price of privilege. He said, in effect, that kids from upper middle class are actually at a disadvantage when it comes to dealing with some of life's great challenges, because they have been provided for in such a way that often creates a sense of entitlement and sometimes leads to narcissistic entitlement. And therefore, when they enter the world, they have a sense of expectation without having the tools to deal with the challenges they face, both in their personal life and their professional life, and dealing with the challenges of the culture. Therefore, he argues that the single most important thing a parent can do is to help form the character of their kids. The character is destiny. So what does that mean? What does it mean to form character? What is character? How do we as parents, how do we as teachers, how do we as a church and academic institutions play a role in that critical function? It's an honor today to have with us Byron Hulsey, with whom we will take up this question. He's a 1986 graduate of Woodberry Forest School and a former member of the faculty. And on July the 1st, in 2014, he became the school's 9th headmaster. Dr. Hulsey is an experienced educator and leader and possesses a great love of learning and a passion for excellence and a deep and abiding respect for culture and for the traditions of the Woodberry Forest School. Before returning to Woodberry, he served as the head of school at Randolph School for 8 years. Randolph is in Huntsville, Alabama. As a Woodberry student, Byron was the senior prefect. He received the Archer Christian Memorial Medal, the school's highest student honor. He was a Jefferson Scholar at the University of Virginia, where he earned his undergraduate degree, and following graduation, he taught for 2 years at a boarding school in England, before returning to his native Texas, where he earned both an MA and PhD degree in history. He's the author of Erickson Dirksen and his Presidents, How a Senate Giant Shaped American Politics, which was published in 2000. And on a personal note, I've had the privilege of knowing Byron for 16, 17 years when we knew each other in Charlottesville. And when I moved to Texas, I had a chance to work with his dad, who's the retired bishop of Northwest Texas. And it is an honor to welcome you to Christ Church and to the Faith Forum. So Byron, what is character? We hear that word used a lot. Many of us have at least either read or heard about David Brooks's book about the road to character. What exactly is character?
Well, Chip, first of all, and to everyone here, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. This is quite an honor for me. I have to tell you that earlier in the week, my wife Jennifer can't be here. Our daughter has a dance competition today, and King's Dominion, and I promised her that I did not schedule this to avoid the dance competition. King's Dominion, but Jennifer was kind of just going through the week, and she didn't feel like this was anything very significant, just another trip for me. And I was visiting with Matt Holcomb earlier in the week, and he pointed me to the website, and I looked through at everything that had been done in the Faith Forum before, and I got home later that evening. I said, Jennifer, this is a big deal. They're going to be like a couple hundred people maybe there, and they simulcast this thing. And, Brene Brown has been, and presiding Bishop Frank Griswold, and Stuart Hoke, and Brian Stevenson. And Jennifer looked at me and she said, and now you? And I said, well, they really have fallen off, I understand. But so thank you for including me in this, and especially on such an important topic. I think about the issue of character every day. It's critical to what we do in schools, and I know it's critical to churches and to families too. When I think about character, I think about men and women and boys and girls who understand very clearly who they are, and also that they have such an important role to play in the world beyond themselves. So it's a combination of real awareness of themselves as important children of God, but not necessarily just exclusive to themselves and to their families or to their small communities, but really created for service to others. And for me, that is the essence of character, that one could be very honest and very dependable and very responsible, but not necessarily oriented to the world beyond himself or herself. And for me, character has to be lived out of ourselves. It has to be projected into the world beyond ourselves. And if I'm thinking broadly about character, that's certainly what I would see. Someone who acts upon his or her beliefs in service to others.
Mm-hmm. So character is for oneself, but character is also for the culture, for the world, it sounds like.
To me, it has to be. If it's going to be meaningful, I think that it's not only important to know what character is, but also to know what is it for? What is its purpose? And for me, the purpose has to be to make the world a better place. And we in the world of education have the opportunity to be maybe a little hyperbolic or rhetorical, but those of us who love education and love being with children see ourselves as part of boys and girls and young men and young women in formation. And that to me is it's a wonderful gift.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference between providing and forming? I think the impulse when you first have children is you say, well, I really want to provide for my kids. And maybe you say, I want to give them the greatest experiences that they can have. Or you might say, I certainly want them to have more than I had. I mean, this is a very common thing that we often hear parents say. But there seems to be a significant difference between providing and forming. What do you see as the key difference there?
Well, I would say, what are we providing for? What is the purpose of the provisions we offer? I would say that the opportunity to form character is really providing opportunities and experiences where character will be forged and formed. I don't see that necessarily coming just through the provision, but really it's an experience that I think allows a boy or a girl or a young man or woman or even an older gentleman or woman to grow in character. It's not material goods as much as it is experiences that I think that really shape a young man or a young woman.
And it's a bit of a fallacy to say that we're ever completely formed in terms of our character. I mean, here we are talking about forming youth and kids as if that formation ends when they become 18 years old, per se. But that character is something that continues to form within us as long as we allow ourselves to be formed.
I remember one Sunday night at Woodberry, we had just had a really difficult week at Woodberry when I was on the faculty in the late 1990s, and we were visited, Chip, by an African-American church in Charlottesville. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he preached that night, and he said something that was very comforting to all of us and a great reminder to me. He said, "We are all under construction." And what he meant was that we are never fully formed, that we are all continuing to be challenged to grow and develop. And so for me, I've always tried to hold fast to that, to know that we are never fully formed, and a young man or a young woman is never fully formed. And that again, for me personally, it's a great privilege to work in a school where we are a learning community.
Mm-hmm. How did tell us about your parents, and what do you remember about how they formed you? What they gave you, what they didn't give you, what they exposed you to, and what they maybe didn't expose you to?
Yeah, well, I think for me personally, and probably for all of us, our first touchstone to character and identity comes from our parents and from our family, and that is certainly the case for me. Chip mentioned that my father is the retired bishop of the Diocese of Northwest Texas, and so I grew up as a PK, a preacher's kid, and then I became a bishop's kid. And maybe Chip's children would agree with me. That's not always easy to be the preacher's kid growing up. I'm sure my children would say it's not easy being the headmaster's son or daughter either. So there's a burden, I think, to bear there a little bit. I was telling Ward Williams, for me personally, it was always about Sunday at noon when I would ask my dad, we've got, it's kickoff. And he's shaking every hand and greeting every person, and I learned patience there, which is certainly part of character formation with my father. And in all seriousness, I think I learned from my father and from his father, who died at the age of 100 and practiced medicine, literally practiced until he was 95, that service to others is a calling that we all have. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather, his father, certainly lived that deep into his life, and that made an enormous impression on me. For my father, as a priest and a bishop, what has really remained with me as a schoolman is the fact that Dad did then and continues to go where the pain is. He does not shy away from suffering or woundedness or pain. He goes to where it is. And for me, that has been a critical part of what I define as character, is to go where the needs are, go where the pain is. And he would do that time and time again. That made an enormous formative difference to me. My mother, she has since died, but we were very, very close. And I think in some ways emotionally I was closer to her. From her I learned loyalty, which I think is an important aspect of character. She also was able to, in her own way and with a wicked sense of humor, demonstrate humility. She, more than anyone, could knock my father down a peg or two when he needed it. And I'll give you one brief story that maybe encapsulates that a little bit. Mom, right after Dad retired, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was a tough run for her and for my father and for our family, but she retained a lot of her very pointed sense of humor. In some ways, her sense of humor got better because she was able to say some things that she wanted to say before, but had held off from saying, and so she was very pointed. And one quick story. When Mom had Alzheimer's, Chip, she couldn't drive anymore, and Dad had to ferry her around to whatever appointment she might need. But when Dad drives you, you do he knows what you need to do, and then he's going to do what he needs to do. Time and time again, he'd stop off and go greet people, put an article that he clipped out for another person here and there, and he'd do all these extra errands. And by the end of all that, my mother was getting very frustrated with all the good that my dad was doing for others. And she's sitting in the front seat just waiting on him to come back, and he finally came back, and she looked at him and she said, "Who do you think you are? Jesus' little friend?" And my dad looked at her and he said, "Well, yes, Linda, I do think that I'm Jesus' little friend." And I think the combination of my mother and father with her humility and her loyalty and his honesty and his inclination to go to where the pain is, for me, that was tremendously important and important.
And he took you there. Tell us about your experience with Kairos ministry. First, what is Kairos ministry, and what happened in that experience for you?
Yeah, I was visiting with Chip a little bit yesterday about this prison ministry called Kairos. And in the 8 years that we lived in Huntsville, Alabama, we had a great experience there, a great family experience there. And one of the things that I did that meant a lot to me that Dad and I had talked about over a number of years was taking an opportunity to live outside of your community, my community, and be part of another community. And I know for sure here in Charlotte there are so many communities all around that are interested in our participation. And for me in Huntsville, Kairos was one of those. And Kairos is a prison ministry made up of volunteers from all the churches in Huntsville, and you train for 8 weeks for a 4-day visit into a medium security prison. And for me personally, it was an introduction into a whole new community, and I learned so much in that opportunity and in that time with those volunteers and also those prisoners. And one thing in particular that jumped out at me, we were all invited when we first began to meet the prisoners to say why we had been part of the Kairos weekend. And one volunteer, who's a very accomplished man in his own right in Huntsville, he said that I'm part of this prison ministry because I believe we are all imprisoned. And to me, he wanted to join and participate in that community to free himself from whatever it was that was holding him captive. And to me, that was an example of character lived beyond ourselves. And it was a meaningful experience for me personally.
So very powerful. I am imprisoned. I do this because I'm imprisoned. Let's talk about imprisonment for a moment and what it means to be in sort of an upper middle class family, upper class family. Obviously, not everybody that goes to Woodberry is wealthy, but Woodberry, as well as nearly every boarding school, carries with it a certain elitism, and so many people are working very hard in here to maybe not necessarily choose to send their kids to a boarding school, but are certainly working very hard to provide for their kids, to give them a great education, give them great opportunities, whether it be in the arts or sports. And there is a lot of pressure. And I'd love for you just to speak into that. Carl Jung said the biggest psychic burden on a child is the unlived life of their parents. And I wonder, as you think about people who apply to Woodberry or people that were applying to the Jefferson Scholar Program at Virginia or in other places, what are you seeing there? And could you just speak into that and give us some perspective, those of us that are parents and maybe grandparents that are watching this happen?
I'll try. It's a fascinating world that we live in right now, and I'm befuddled by it and I'm baffled by it in many ways. But I would say that what I see so much in so many places is an overriding anxiety that borders on fear. And fear is not consistent with the life that I believe we're called to live. And I'm not sure what we're afraid of, and I'm not sure what we're fearful of, but I believe that we are. And I cannot speak to life in Charlotte, North Carolina. I can speak to life in Huntsville, Alabama, where I was before, and I can maybe speak even more fully to life at Woodberry Forest. I'd say at Woodberry, one thing that I love about Woodberry and many schools like Woodberry is that it's a place that is designed to be difficult. It is designed to be hard, and it is designed to be frustrating and disappointing to all of us. And I think that's I think that makes life more real for the boys and for the teachers. And so what I would say at Woodberry is that we, one of the great pieces of the Woodberry life that I love so much is that the boys don't really know where their classmates come from. They don't really know who lives in what kind of house or who drives what kind of car, because we're all in that together. And we all have the same little dorm rooms and the same dormitory bathrooms, and we all eat the same meals, and no one drives. And so in some ways, Chip, it's an unfair question, because at Woodberry, we're kind of freed from that. And that makes an enormous difference in the opportunity that I think we have to form and forge character for the boys who are there. I think in day schools, it's just fundamentally different. It's fundamentally more difficult, but I would say that I've seen so many parents over the years who do this work really well with their children by doing a few things that I really admire. One of them is coming to the conclusion early on that their children are children of God in their own right, more than they are my children or your children. And so I believe that a parent who demonstrates character understands that his child is not his own, the parent's child, but is God's child, and therefore has more freedom to live his or her own life. And that can be very difficult, especially if the child has very different interests than does the parent. Kind of connected to that, I see the parents that I've grown to admire over the years have like 4 children or 5 children, and it's really wonderful when you see the 4 or 5 children are so different, and yet they're part of the same family. And that's, to me, the secret sauce that I would want to live into as a parent myself, is welcoming the differences and celebrating. We have at Woodberry, and I know a lot of schools do this, but we start the school year at Woodberry with the faculty with one goal in mind, that the boys under our care are known, challenged, and loved. And I think that's really important as a commitment to their character and to their growth, that they're known, challenged, and loved. But occasionally I'm called upon to ask teachers and myself, how do the boys know they're known, challenged, and loved? It's one thing for me to believe that. It's another thing for the boys to believe it themselves and to know it and to act on it and to feel it. And I was thinking this about my own children, Jennifer's and our children. We have 2, a boy, Ben, who's 12, and a daughter, Claire, who's 8. And occasionally I wonder, what do they know I believe? Like I know what my father believes, and I know what my mother believes. I think it's important that over time, Ben and Claire know what I believe, as opposed to what exactly I want them to do.
It'd be interesting for every parent, and maybe many have, would be to list what they understand to be the key virtues, or as Dr. King spoke of, the content of character. Because our various moral ecologies might be very different. Like, you might come up with a list of what you think is the content of character. You and I talked about grit humility, honesty, loyalty, service, responsibility. We might come up with different terms and ideas, but how critical it is to come up with them.
Yes.
And then to say more than words
About what those are.
about what they are and how we live them. And I remember when I was when I came here for 10 years ago, and I was having a conversation with a wonderful parishioner here, and I was thinking about my kids, and he and his wife have 3 boys. He said, I said, well, what's the key to parenting? And it's just kind of an off-the-cuff thing. And he looked back and he said, monkey see, monkey do. Mm-hmm. And I thought, yeah, they're going to learn a lot more by not just what I say and what I do, but what I do. And so I'm struck with the example that your mother and father set, and that they challenge you to do hard things. I want to come back to that, because this is sort of not really a Woodberry conversation as it is a character formation, but I'm struck that you said, we've designed Woodberry to be hard for boys. And there, maybe there's somebody here that is going, well, wait a minute. That's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I have provided for my kids. I mean, I've given them a comfortable lifestyle, given them opportunities for this, that, and the other. Got great rooms. They take great vacations. We expose them to things. They've got a lot of privilege. Why on earth would I spend X amount of money a year so that they can come to Woodberry and have a hard life, right? Wait a minute. How about internet, and tailors or whatever? Do you the laundry? Why is it important in your mind in character formation for things to be hard? And a further step, I'd love for you to speak into the issue of failure, because I think that that's really hard for parents to see their kids fail and let them fail. So talk about why is the moral challenge so important to character formation, and why is failure important to character formation?
Yeah, I can't. I don't think that we are serving our children well when we are seeking to comfort them at every turn or protect them at every turn. Colleges and employers are speaking to this, that more and more young men and young women who go to college, or more and more young women who go into the workforce, they're not ready for the challenges that are in front of them, in part because they may not have failed enough, they may not have been disappointed enough, they may not have had enough difficulty. And so I think that for Woodberry, at least, it's always been that commitment to challenge and to difficulty and disappointment, because the belief is that that's where you grow the most. I don't think that it's possible to forge and form character in an environment of comfort and ease. I just don't think that's possible. We may be able to talk about it if we've mastered the language, but to your point about actions, speaking more loudly than words, that comes through difficulty, and that comes through disappointment. And so my sense of a great school is that it should be challenging. It is also very, very important that boys and girls who are being challenged, and intentionally so, know that they are loved at the same time. I learned as a teacher a lot of years ago, many years ago, when I was young in the teaching profession, I used to struggle with how hard should I make my class. I wanted to be liked, but I also wanted to be challenging, and that's a very difficult balance to strike. And early on in my tenure, I remember visiting with this young man who was halfway through the school year, and we were talking about American history and his progress in it. And I said, this is a deliberately difficult class. And he said to me, I respect that. And that was a moment of revelation for me that I won't forget, because it dawned on me that boys and girls want to be challenged, because that is how they feel respected. But they want to be challenged and respected by men and women that they know have their back. When I'm visiting with a young man, or in previous iterations, girls in schools, when they talk about teachers that they don't like, or they don't care for, or they don't respect, it's generally the language is that they're not predictable, that they think that there's a game to the system that they haven't quite figured out. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, when they're speaking about teachers that they admire and they respect, and I ask this question every year of Woodberry boys and girls and Randolph before, I want to know, who do you admire the most? When they're talking about teachers that they like the most, it's always a difficult class. It's really interesting to me that almost 100% of boys and girls who answer that question talk about men and women in classes that were hard. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because that's where they feel respected, and they know that when they're in that moment of being respected in that environment, they have the opportunity to grow. Mm-hmm. And so I welcome that, and I celebrate that, as long as the boys at Woodberry and boys and girls in great schools feel like they are cared for. Mm-hmm. I think that's essential. I think it's really, really important for a parent to challenge his or her children to go beyond themselves, and at the same time know that they are unconditionally loved. Mm-hmm. There's a piece in David Brooks's book, The Road to Character, that some of you may have read, where he notes all this anxiety in young people today, and he questions whether or not children feel unconditionally loved. Mm-hmm. And that saddens me if that's the mm-hmm. case. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to go a little further, because I think we're really on to something when we talk about doing challenging things. Again, I think in some ways it's sort of counterintuitive to think in those terms, that we want to provide for our kids, give them the best opportunities. The author of the book, The Price of Privilege, also talks about how and I've heard you talk about this, that you prepare the kid and not the path. But often what we do is those of us who have advantage in social capital, provide and prepare the path, but don't prepare the kid.
Right.
That's a powerful difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I got that idea from Rob Evans, who speaks to these issues in schools, and said that to parents one night. I was really moved by it. He said, it's really important to prepare the children for the path and not the path for the child. And the wisdom in that is that we really don't know what the path is for them. If we're being honest, we don't know what the world will look like in 20 years or 30 years or 50 years, but we do know the qualities of character that will endure. So his point was, why not invest in those qualities of character that will endure and prepare the child for whatever path lies ahead? I thought that was a comment worthy of, it's a very, very wise point. Very difficult to do, and as you say, Chip, it's counterintuitive, and it hurts us to see our children struggle. Mm-hmm. And yet, I have to believe that it's really important for their formation to mm-hmm. do so. Mm-hmm.
When I was in Texas, it was spring break time, and I was really, spring break time. Where are you going for spring break, et cetera, et cetera. And I happened to ask this family what they were up to, and they said, we're going to the islands. So, okay, great. Sounds wonderful. He said, yeah, we're going to go dig water wells in Haiti. And I just was really kind of blown away by that. And that's not an indictment on people who do fancy things, so to speak, or do wonderful things. But I was struck that these folks had the capacity to do that. And they had done that before, you see. But they felt like they were running out of time with their kids. And so what they wanted to teach them was what the world looked like for other people, and that there were great challenges that people faced in the world, that they had gone to all these locations, but what they had not seen was the poverty that was there. And so they decided to actually pick a country and a people and to go connect, meet, and do something. And I think, in fact, what they did is they took the money that they would have spent on all the extra stuff, and they invested that in their trip and gave away the money to the organizations in the country. And I was just really struck by that as a hard thing, that they had the capacity. And I guess what I'm saying is, you know, I'm struck that there are choices that we make and choices that we can make that need not be driven by guilt or shame or anything like that, but have to do with what's the legacy? What's the family legacy? Is it just opportunity and privilege? Or is it, as you say, leading people to do challenging things that are ultimately very rewarding, like your Kairos ministry experience? You know, one of the things that we talk about here, and we're going to be talking a lot more about, is generosity. What does it mean to really be generous? And that the ultimate sign of discipleship is living a generous life. How do you talk to kids about generosity when they're at a stage in their lives when there's a bit of a me mentality?
That's a really good question, and I don't know that generosity is natural in us. And I have to be honest and say that I'm not sure that character is natural in us either. It has to be developed and grown and nurtured and constructed, as I said. And I think generosity is a piece of that. At Woodberry, the environment that I can speak to, we make a pledge to the boys that at school they will be known, challenged, and loved. And I say to their parents, even on those days when your sons may be almost unlovable, they will be known, challenged, and loved. And in return, I ask the boys to give to us a commitment that they will work hard, that they will build their character. Again, intentionally, the present case, build your character. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, learn to, because I don't believe it's natural, learn to take care of each other. Mm. So one of the areas of opportunity for us at Woodberry is to live into this inclination and this opportunity to take care of each other. And for us, it is the older boys learning how to take care of the younger boys. Mm-hmm. And that has not always been the case at Woodberry Forest, nor has it been the case in most schools or teams and the like. But I think there's a great opportunity there for older boys to learn how to take care of younger boys, and when they become older, pay it forward through the generations. And if we create that in our culture, my sense is that if a boy learns how to do that at Woodberry or wherever he is in school, or a girl wherever she's in school, they'll learn how rewarding that is, how good that feels, mm-hmm. how liberated they feel in that environment. Mm-hmm. And then they're much more likely to do it in college. And if they do it again in college, they're much more likely to do it in their lives. But mm-hmm. I don't believe they come to us with that naturally part of their DNA.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we are trying to ignite here, and boy, we really got a lot of help with Brian Stevenson, who was here just a few weeks ago, is we're trying to ignite generosity and moral imagination. This greater vision for what our city can be, for issues of race, class, discrimination, all of the various things that we're dealing with as a city, as a state, as a culture. And I'm struck that unless people, again, it's counterintuitive, but unless people are exposed to poverty, discrimination, classism, unless they're forced to really struggle with these issues, and as you say, as your father did and as your father led you into, go where the pain is, there is likely not to be a generous heart and likely not to be moral imagination. So what what as we start to close, what would you challenge us as a church to think about, and what would you challenge our parents to be thinking about as we're all in different stages of the journey, and grandparents that are here? We have uncles, we have godparents. As we think about, fulfilling our baptismal vows, what would be some things that you would challenge us to do, both as individuals and as a community?
That's a great question. One thing that I go back to is another element of the Kairos experience for those of us who volunteered and went into this prison. It was never intended to be the sort of environment where we proselytized or tried to convert these men in white, we call them, the prisoners. Instead, the only requirement that we were given was to listen, love, love. And for me as an educator, and for me as a parent, and maybe for you all too, I have to admit that I don't always listen, love, love. And I believe that all children want to be listened to. And I believe that all of us have an opportunity to do that for each other and with each other. And to me, that's the opportunity that beckons, that a Brian Stevenson would call on us all to embrace, is the recognition that, and this is an area where Woodberry can be a cocoon, and maybe even a place that is overly sheltered from the real world, and we have to work on that internally at a place like Woodberry, and I hope that we do and that we will. But I do not want the world to be invisible to the boys at Woodberry Forest. And I do not want the world to be invisible to our children, Ben and Claire. And I think that takes a deliberate effort on the part of both parents and teachers and educators and coaches and teachers to look for those opportunities to go to where the pain is and find ourselves made free through that experience. And that is, to me, character in action that has, for David Brooks, the eulogy virtues emphasized more highly than the resume virtues that we spend so much time developing over our lives.
Mm-hmm. So do hard things. Do challenging things. Go where the pain is, and that's where the learning will take place.
I think that's right. For me, it's right. I also really believe it's important for us to be humble about it. The Bishop of Alabama is a wonderful man named Keith Sloan, and he says often when he is preaching, I have very, very sincere beliefs, and I may be wrong. And I really admire that spirit because it conveys an eagerness to know more. Mm-hmm. It conveys a curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I think curiosity is an element of character that is often overlooked. If you're curious, if you're inclined to be curious, you're inclined to grow. And if character is to be constructed and is not ever completed, then I think curiosity helps. I think humility is critical, and it is in short supply. There's no question about that. And that quote, I have sincere beliefs and I may be wrong, is, to me, it's liberating. Mm-hmm. But it's also scary for those of us who want to be right.
Yes. Yeah, it seems that the pathway into relationship, as we seek to deal with the challenges of our world and build bridges across difference and really understand, is, as you say, is humility, openness, and listening. And you've given us a lot to think about today, Byron. And we're so very grateful for you being here. I thought what we might do for just a few minutes is to open up for Q&A. Does anybody have a question?
Byron, following up on all of that, as a parent, as the observer of and participant in the development of a child, and yours and Woodberry's in the same role, what should be the reaction to and maybe corrective action if you see a child's development, a character development going well, but you see it as based on faith and faith beliefs fundamentally different from your own, or perhaps not at all?
Well, Russell, that's an incredibly difficult question right out of the gate there. For me personally, character is forged and formed in community, and the healthiest communities are places where we feel incredibly big and incredibly small at the same time. And by incredibly big, I mean that for me at Woodberry, I want the boys to know that they matter, and incredibly small in the sense that we are part of something that is much, much bigger than we will ever be. And so for me personally, that includes absolutely a commitment to my faith, but it also has to do with a commitment to ideals and values that I have been blessed to be given. And that, I think, is more important than trying to impress upon a young man or a young woman exactly what to believe. But it is important, I think, to challenge them to appreciate the fact that there is a mystery that no one of us will ever be able to understand completely. And that, to me, is first of all, it's true, and second of all, it's an important element of growing in character.
Questions?
There's one right here to your left.
Good morning. I have a question about challenging children and allowing them to fail. I think that's one of the hardest tasks that we face as parents, because these universities and employers that you're talking about complaining about it, have zero tolerance for failure, on the part of these children as well. So what are some of the ways at Woodberry that you see boys failing and then growing from that failure, but still being able to get into great schools and get great jobs?
By the way, Byron, that was a very civil question from an Episcopal parent.
Yeah. I should say for the record that I love Episcopal High School. My father went to seminary right next door. It's a great place. I believe that at Woodberry there's another element of character and community that I think is critical, and that is culture. And culture is really difficult to define, but it essentially has to do with how do we act and why. And the healthiest cultures are not rule-based or policy-driven, but they are, in a sense, mores passed down from generation to generation, and in the case of a school, grade to grade. And my sense is that the older boys at Woodberry are able to convey to the younger boys that it is okay to struggle. It is okay to be disappointed. It is okay to be deflated. It is okay to wonder what it's all for. And my sense is that because the boys at Woodberry are going through their lives shoulder to shoulder and elbow to elbow, there is communion there and community there and culture there that gives them comfort through the difficult times. And my hope is that as they get older, they are able to speak to their growth and development. An associated question, we would all want our students, our boys and girls, our children to grow and develop and to be learners. That's easy enough to say, but imagine going to a child in a class or a boy on a team or a girl on a team and ask a more difficult question. Ask the question, in this class or on this team or in this family or through this experience within this church, how do you know you're learning? That's a really tough question for a lot of children to answer. How do you know you're learning? And if you do it, and I've done it before, the answers come back and they're all over the map. A couple of them are honest and say, I don't know. Or, well, he tells me I am. Or, I've got an A in this class. That's how I know I'm learning. Or, we're undefeated. The real answer that's better is one where a boy or a girl or one of us could point to skills that we now have developed that we didn't have before. I asked this question several years ago to a boy who was the second string center on the basketball team at Randolph School in Huntsville, Alabama. I said, how do you know you're learning? And John Martin was the starting center, and he said, well, I can guard John Martin in practice now. And he said that with pride. And for me, that wherever he goes to college or whatever he does in his life, if he can articulate how he knows he's learning, he's going to be more motivated to do that and reiterate that and iterate that again and again and again and again. And my guess is that he'll be better in life. But that's a confidence that comes through struggle that I think has to be embraced rather than shielded from a child. Mm-hmm. How do you know you're learning? Not an easy question to answer.
And it's difficult to realize that at a certain stage in life, you learn a lot more from your mistakes, from your successes. And well, let's we're going to have to wrap this up because we're going to have a bunch of young children running in here to go to church here in just a few minutes. But why don't we pray for a spirit of grace in this community? Okay? The Lord be with you. Gracious God, we are all learning, whether we be children, youth, parents, adults, grandparents. We're learning what it means to be human and what it means to be Christian. Help us to not see our mistakes and failures as a sign of weakness, but help us to see it as a sign of opportunity and growth. And may we become increasingly aware of your power and your grace to teach us, to transform us, and to help us grow into the people you call us to be, not merely for our benefit, but for the benefit of our community and the world. This we ask in the name of Jesus, who said, "Follow me." Amen. Thank you, Byron.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you.